Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Thursday evening, the 25th of April, 2019. And tonight's topic, Bitcoin's Jekyll Island. We've got some news of a special meeting that took place in an area of Singapore. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. It's a very interesting story. It's something that we've been talking about for the longest time, about how the banking infrastructure, the too big to fail banks, Silicon Valley, Wall Street, are interested in Bitcoin, but they've been reluctant to pull the trigger until they have things set up the way they want them. And I'm going to tell you about a story that has broke from a meeting in January of 2018 at Sentosa Island in Singapore. Now, back in March of 2018, I had put together a 7 or 8 minute video explaining the concept that the bankers were looking to get into Bitcoin. And they must have looked on in horror in 2017 as YouTubers sold billions of dollars of crypto tokens. The price of Bitcoin rose from $800 to $20,000. New startup exchanges were getting all of the trading fees. And that's when I said to myself that I think the bankers want in on this. And I put together a video called Bitcoin is a Dirty Business and the Bankers Want In. And I think that's exactly what's been happening. And I've been talking for a while about how the bankers are looking on and figuring out how they can get a piece of this action. Now, there's two general theories in the market of people who follow Bitcoin, and I haven't taken either of them. The one is that Bitcoin is going to destroy central banking. It's going to destroy fiat currency. It's going to take over the world. It's a replacement. And I never bought into that. And the other one is people who don't like Bitcoin say, yeah, that's not going to happen. And if it did, governments are just going to crack down on it and crush it like a gnat. And I don't believe that story either. What I think is going to happen more likely is that they're going to find a way to co-opt and bring as much of cryptocurrency into the banking system. With proper regulations, they know they can make a fortune. It's just like when the mafia did not want to get into drugs, but they knew that they had to. I'm going to play you a clip from that video I did well over a year ago. And we see it happening, but this news of a story of Bitcoin's Jekyll Island, that's what I call it, because I think that's exactly what it is a way that the bankers got together in January of 2018 after the Bitcoin price collapse, or just as it was happening, to figure out a way, working with the startup companies like Binance and Coinbase and big banks like Standard Chartered and Goldman Sachs, to figure out how they can get into this business. And we've seen, and I've noticed this before and since, many stories of how you see big investment pouring into the crypto space. Remember, we've got Bakkt coming up, you've got TD Ameritrade and RSX, Fidelity. And this story pretty much shows that that's exactly the intention of the banking system, is to bring all this in. They want mass adoption. Why do they want mass adoption? Not because they think it's going to crush them, because they know they can make a fortune on this. All right, we've got other stories tonight. We've got a breaking Tether story. We've got some news on the 2020 campaign and Joe Biden entering into the race. We've got information on the Mueller report. We've got an interesting story on Ledger and a venture they have, or investment from Samsung right after they've had this other agreement with Nomura Bank in Japan. Also, some very interesting news from France that we see happening with respect to France setting up a law whereby you cannot be told, or you not be shut out of the banking system solely because you are involved in cryptocurrency. So we've seen in recent days lots of stories where France is looking pretty much to lead Europe in cryptocurrency adoption. All right, I'm going to play for you now, though, this report I did about a year ago. So let's take a listen to it, and then we'll see you on the other side of it. The too big to fail banks are at a crossroads at the moment as to whether to get involved with cryptocurrencies or not. The leadership at the central banks has basically, for the most part, said they don't want to get involved. Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, probably the top bank, has said that Bitcoin is a fraud and that anyone who worked at his company he would fire if he found out they were trading in Bitcoin. Now, Goldman Sachs has been less harsh on it. Goldman Sachs, head of Goldman Sachs, has said that Bitcoin has some promise. We're still looking at it. And indeed, they have an ownership interest in a company which has an ownership interest now through an acquisition in Poloniex, which is a cryptocurrency exchange. So they've kind of made a first move into the crypto space. But for the most part, the too big to fail banks, the large money center banks, have not been engaged outwardly in Bitcoin. It's not part of their business model, although you know that there are people at those banks that are actively engaged in cryptocurrency projects. But the outward-facing statements of these banks are they're not involved in Bitcoin. And this reminds me, and I think they will be, this reminds me a lot of the scene in The Godfather where the large mafia families have decided they're not involved with Bitcoin. However, some of the young Turks, they've decided they want to get involved. Drugs. And one of the mafia families is considering getting involved. But they want the go-ahead of Don Corleone. They want the go-ahead of the largest family. And Don Corleone takes it under consideration. And first he meets with his eldest son, Sonny, and Tom Hagen, who is his consigliere. And he asks them what they think. And of course, the hothead Sonny says there's a lot of money in that white powder. So he's obviously in favor of it. Tom Hagen gives a more reasoned approach. And his approach is one of a practicality. And he says, well, I say yes, there's more money potential in narcotics than anything else we're looking at. Now, if we don't get into it, somebody else will. Maybe one of the 5 families, maybe all of them. Now, with the money they earn, they can buy more police and political power. Then they come after us. Now we have the unions, we have the gambling, and they're the best things to have. But narcotics is a thing of the future. And if we don't get a piece of that action, we risk everything we have. I mean, not now, but on 10 years from now. So Tom Hagen is aware that someone's going to move first. Someone's going to get a piece of this action. Someone's going to become more powerful than the Corleone family if they get involved. And Jamie Dimon must be looking over his shoulder thinking, Goldman Sachs may be getting involved in this cryptocurrency thing. They've got a foot in the water. They've got a toe in the water. So Tom Hagen has arranged a meeting with the Turk, who has been sent on behalf of one of the heads of another family, the Tatalias, to see if the Corleone family would be willing to, in a sense, go in on a joint venture whereby the Tatalias will import the drugs, get them through Sicily, process them, and then sell them on the street. And in exchange, the Corleones will provide some financing and then provide that political protection through the relationships that they have with law enforcement on the street, police officers, and also in the courts. And this way they should be able to take their drug business public, so to speak, amongst the mob, but also know that they have a protected and controlled business that is now sanctioned the same way they get away with their other illegal activities like prostitution and the like. So Don Corleone goes to take the meeting, and he sits down, he listens to the proposal from Sollozzo, who's been sent by the Tatalias, And he gives his answer, and he says, "But I must say no to you, and I'll give you my reasons. It's true, I have a lot of friends in politics, but they wouldn't be friendly very long if they knew my business was drugs, instead of gambling, which they rule is a harmless vice. But drugs is a dirty business." And then when Sollozzo starts to interject his protestations, he says, it makes no difference to me what a man does for a living, understand? But your business is a little dangerous. Now this causes a big stir amongst the mob families, because they were expecting Corleones to go along with this, and now Don Corleone
This mug stuff, it's a dirty business.
It's a dirty business, and he's not going to do it. Well, this leads to Sonny, who gets a little excited during the meeting when Sollozzo says to Don Corleone, "Hey, look, what's the problem? The Tatalians will guarantee your investment." And Sonny butts says, "Hey, you're telling me the Tatalians are going to guarantee our investment?" And that indicates to Sollozzo that if Don Corleone wasn't around, that the Corleones would be on board and they would go forward with their plan to sell narcotics. So they try to kill Don Corleone. He survives the assassination attempt, and now there's still no issue. Finally, they manage to get to Sonny. Sonny gets killed, and now the families have to meet because there's been bloodshed back and forth. These types of wars are bad for business. So Don Corleone shows up with the members of the five families. And remember, this is all over, and all happened over Don Corleone refusing to get involved in the drug business. And they all want to get involved in the drug business, but they've got their moral reasons not to. So Don Corleone shows up at the meeting, and he says he was against doing this drug thing. And he said, "And why?" "Because I believe this drug business is going to destroy us in the years to come. I mean, it's not like gambling or liquor, or even women, which is something that most people want nowadays, and is forbidden to them by the Patronavant of the church. Even the police departments that have helped us in the past with gambling and other things are going to refuse to help us when it comes to narcotics. And I believed that then, and I believe that now." And he immediately gets cut off by Barzini, who says, "Times have changed. It's not like the old days when we can do anything we want." Then another mobster steps in and says, he says, "Somebody comes to them and says, 'I have powders. If you want to put up 3,000-4,000 investment, we can make 50,000 distributing.' So they can't resist." And he's concerned that his guys are involved, his underlings are involved with drugs. They can make this kind of money. But then he says, "I want it controlled as a business to keep it respectable." And then Barzini says, "Well, we all agreed the traffic in drugs will be permitted but controlled." And that is what I think is going to happen. The wild, wild west of Bitcoin, there's so much money that's being made there. But the banksters know that they can't be involved with that. They can't be involved with things that look like money laundering, the things that look like, well, there's some illegal activities going on over here or there. They need to bring it into a controlled and respectable environment. And that's where I think all this regulation is heading. That basically, they're going to try to co-opt, control the cryptocurrency space and get a piece of the action. And they're going to do it with the protection of the legal system, the protection of the regulatory system. And that is what I think is what's coming. The idea that the central banks, mobsters, bank, whatever you want to call them, or the too big to fail banks are going to squash this. I don't think so. I think they want their piece. I think they want to control it. I think they know, as Sonny said, there's a lot of money in that white powder. They know that this is money. They know that it potentially can take them down. But I think they know that if they get involved with it, they got a much better chance of surviving, a much better chance of getting a piece of the action. What do you guys think? All right, so that's what I was talking about 13 months ago. And a key point in there is when one of the mobsters says, "This is not the old days where we can do anything we want." Now, the old days were set up in 1910 when the, quote, banksters of the time, Nelson Aldrich, Henry Davison, Arthur Shelton, Paul Wahlberg, all the big bank guys at the time met at Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia to come up with the plan for setting up the Federal Reserve System. Private bank that would be sanctioned by the U.S. government, which would basically allow them to take control of the country's money supply. And you've had these bankers running the Federal Reserve System ever since. Well, Bitcoin comes along, and it's not an immediate threat, but it has the potential to do finance outside of the banking system. Well, that can't be allowed. And so we saw in 2012, 13, 14, 15, and 16, the development of Bitcoin didn't become a threat in a sense that it was taking a lot of business away, but it does have the potential to take business away from bankers in terms of payment systems, for fees. And then also, even if it's not a threat to the existing banking system, it's a threat in the sense that money can be made outside the banking system through trading platforms and cryptocurrencies. And we saw Binance, Coinbase become relatively large companies in a short period of time on the basis just of crypto trading. So if you're Charles Schwab, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, JP Morgan, you're not getting those trading dollars on cryptocurrency. So they want a piece of that. Also, there's big money in lending cryptocurrencies. We've got some stories later on the program tonight. Particular companies lent out almost $500 million in the first quarter of 2019. There's storage fees. So you have an ecosystem that can be outside of the banking system, even if it's not a threat. But it could become a threat if that system were to become large enough. People, the unbanked, start using cryptocurrencies peer-to-peer. So it is somewhat of a threat, but it's also an opportunity. And I think that's what the bankers saw. That's what I've been predicting. Their reaction is not going to be to lobby governments to shut it down, because if there's an opportunity there and they play their cards right, they can subsume a lot of crypto activity within the existing banking system, the payment system. They can do ICOs that are regulated instead of just some knucklehead with a YouTube channel promoting some dopey token and raising a fortune. They know they can do that better. So if the YouTubers can raise $4 billion, $5 billion, they know they can raise $500 billion through the issuance of regulated tokens through their banks and through their accountants and lawyers and registering them with the SEC. So they realize that there's big money in this and there's no reason for it to be shut down. Remember, what banks like, or what Wall Street likes, and they've become addicted to the past couple of generations, are bubbles. And every bubble has its own problem. The bubble problem for the housing bubble, let's go before that. The dot-com bubble problem was valuations. At some point, you can only say that a company that has no profits, has barely any revenues, you can't keep valuing it $20, $30 billion. There is a point where investors will pull back. Now, they've somewhat obviated that problem by having the central banks or others actually buy these companies that aren't worth much. But it's still a problem because you're stretched by the valuation. There is a limit to how much you can boost the stock price. Same with the housing crisis. The problem with the housing, you can boost housing prices, you can lower interest rates, you can go down to zero, you can change the lending requirements, you can collateralize the loans and sell them. So the more loans that are issued, it's a good thing. That's a good thing, because then you put all the loans in a security package and then you sell it to the 1%. Yeah, you can do all that, but you're still limited by, you can't get the housing prices. You can't take a $150,000 single family home in Kansas and drive it to $4 million. There is a limit to what you can do. But cryptocurrencies really are made for Wall Street. Why? There's no valuation limit. You're not limited by income. It's not like in order for a particular token or cryptocurrency to rise that you have to make sure that the people can afford to buy it. No, you don't have to worry about valuation. There's no way to value these things. So cryptocurrencies provide a great opportunity for Wall Street to create a bubble in which they don't have to worry about foreclosures. They don't have to worry about valuations. They can promote the great blue sky. And I think that's exactly what they see in this. And when they see, as I mentioned, these YouTube knuckleheads promoting unregistered security tokens and watching people pour money into them, I'm sure they know they can do. I'm positive they can do better if you had regulation. Why? Because they can get institutional investors and even central banks to buy into this kind of stuff. I'm not advocating for this to happen. This is my objective analysis of what I see happening and how I think that bankers and think. And regulation is generally the friend of the rich and powerful because it crowds out the YouTubers from promoting these types of, in a sense, scams. But remember, if it's a regulated token, it could be a scam, but it's not a scam because it's all part and parcel. The bankers can pay lawyers and accountants hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, to produce documents that have to pass muster with the SEC before they can be sold. Then they just trot them out to their institutional clients, and next thing you know, a lot of this cryptocurrency stuff comes under the banner of regulated and therefore legit, I suppose. All right, so what we've seen then is that the bankers in 1910 created the Federal Reserve banking system, and it's been very good to them. Now, Bitcoin is somewhat of a threat, and as I mentioned, I don't think it's an immediate threat, but it is indeed an opportunity. Now, let's talk about Bitcoin's Jekyll Island, which is now Sentosa Island. Let me show you a couple of pictures. I've got a few pictures here that I licensed from Ken Stock Photo, but there was an article in Bloomberg. It was called Crypto's Long Road to Acceptance May Have Started Here. And that's an aerial shot of Sentosa Island. It says, in the wake of the 2018 crash, 24 traders gathered to plan its emergence as a new asset class. Step one, a clearinghouse. You can see this is the type of thing where I didn't know this at the time when I was doing my YouTube on this, and I've been talking about this even for a year before that I thought that the bankers were licking their chops at how they can get at this piece of the action. I never bought into I did in 2013. I thought it was possible they might want to crush it. But by 2017, 16, and the fact that it hadn't gone anywhere, I was convinced that this was big money that the banks were going to want in on. And I just didn't see it taking off as some type of anarcho-capitalist way of the world. We're just going to move into an unregulated environment. And so I saw that article. I'm going to show you. Here's the headline of that article. Crypto's long road to acceptance may have started here. This again, Sentosa Island. In the wake of the 2018 crash, 24 traders gathered to plan its emergence as a new asset class. Now, who was at that meeting? Well, we're going to get into that. Here was another story. Got picked up in, actually saw it first in Cointelegraph. And I mentioned anyone following Smaulgld for the past 2 years would not find this surprising. And it says top traders held talks on making crypto part of global financial architecture. Top traders held talks on making crypto part of global financial architectures. And they mentioned representatives from Galaxy Digital, Coinbase, Binance, Goldman Sachs were among those said to have attended these January 2018 talks. Let me just show you this. This is Sentosa Island. You have to take a cable car. It's in Singapore, and it's an island. And then you go there, and it's a very nice looking place there, and I'm sure they enjoyed themselves. Here's a bigger view of that bridge there. And that is Sentosa Island. Let me give you another shot. They must have enjoyed themselves immensely there. There's another picture. A very nice looking bridge. Hang out on the beach. Talk about global crypto domination. Any more pictures? Oh, that's it for the pictures. All right. So they're all there. They're talking about this. Now, who's at this meeting? Now, let's see what the Bloomberg article says. In the wake of the 2018 crash, 24 traders gathered to plan the emergence of crypto as a new asset class. It goes on to say, once the crypto craze collapsed at bottom in December, actually it looks like they had this meeting. I don't know if they had it in 2019 or 2018. It says in the wake. No, it's in 2000. Let me see here. It's hard to tell. Maybe it was this year in 2019. I'm sure there's other meetings. But anyway, the point is they had this meeting. And it says after the crypto craze collapse hit bottom in December, I guess that was in 2018, did Standard Chartered's PLC veteran Ho Long Ling issue his call to the market's biggest traders to join him to brainstorm making digital tokens part of the world's financial architecture. So it seems like this happened in January 2019, not 2018. So I was long predicting this to happen, and it hadn't even happened yet. And the goal of these 24 men that gathered in January at a resort at Singapore's Sentosa Island, which you're looking at there, was to create the framework for an orderly marketing crypto derivatives part of every primitive asset class's journey to acceptance. And if they succeeded at this meeting, then they would see the crypto market take shape in order to absorb the entry of traditional finance firms. Now, what has become fashionable, I guess, since this meeting in the last couple of months, and I've been saying for 2 years, is the idea of Bitcoin financialization. That has now become a generally accepted concept that there is financialization. There's Bitcoin ETFs, Bitcoin storage, and we got some stories later on that. But the idea that they were meeting specifically to do this, the emergence of a new asset class that they realize can help them, in my opinion, with creating another bubble. Because if you have this, then if it's totally under a regulatory environment, there's always institutional investors that are looking for the next big thing. They're always looking to promote the next best thing. We had the .com bubble, then we had the real estate bubble, now we have the everything bubble. Well, each one of those, something took their place. So you went from .com to real estate. You went from real estate to everything bubble. And I think now you're going to go from everything bubble to crypto bubble, and they're putting all the pieces in place. And a lot of people say, we already had the crypto bubble in 2017. Now, I think that was child's play. I think that was, again, knuckleheads on YouTube. That was retail people, fear of missing out. That Wall Street did not participate in that in any real big way, shape, or form. You didn't really get the CME Group's Bitcoin futures until the end of it in December 2017. It's only recently that they've actually got some decent volume on those futures. So I think the bubble, the Bitcoin crypto bubble, is yet to come. I think that was just a rehearsal for what's to come. And we got here, I'm looking at all these different quotes, and I'll leave a link to this article for you from Bloomberg. Here's a quote from Aaron O'Shea, former compliance chief for Credit Suisse. Crypto is now practically a pejorative. We'll need to shake off this taint if it's to go to mainstream. And then it says, however, these traders went to Singapore. They went to Sentosa Island, and you had there Galaxy Digital. You had Circle Internet Financial Limited, which counts as Goldman Sachs Group as among its investors. And then you had the startup exchanges, Binance and Coinbase. Now, Binance and Coinbase are almost like the Salazzo, the Turk, the startup mafias that really need the big players to come in to really give the whole space this legitimacy. And they met. And you can see how you have Wall Street bankers, including Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, in 2005 created a standardized contract for credit default swaps and mortgage-backed securities. The market boomed until it melted down a few years later. So you don't have to go back to 1910 to see how bankers meet and create schemes that they then launch on the world to make a fortune. You're talking about in 2005, they had the standardized contracts for credit default swaps, mortgage-backed securities, and that was, what? Your real estate bubble. Before that, and I worked on this back in the 90s, they created the swaps and the whole derivatives markets with the International Swap Dealers Association, which was called ISDA, and it's still around today, and they made a fortune on issuing derivatives. And now, I believe that they have met and they have figured out and try to figure out a way to bring cryptocurrencies to the masses here. And let's see if there's anything else in the story that's of interest. But yeah, I think this is a very important milestone here that they actually met on Sentosa Island. I believe this could be the equivalent, if not of the meeting at Jekyll Island to create the Fed, but at least along the lines of something like the introduction to the, let's say the derivatives creation or the introduction of credit default swaps. I believe this is a big Wall Street milestone. I've been talking about it for 2 years. See, I think they see these opportunities. You know, you can turn a threat into an opportunity very easily if you've got the money, you have the infrastructure, and you have the ability to buy, as Hagen would say, political power. And clearly, these companies, these entities know how to do it. There's no point in crushing this if there's fortunes to be made. All right, let's see if there's anything else on this particular story I want to cover for now. I mean, this is really a continuing story, but the Sentosa Island, I believe, is Bitcoin's Jekyll Island. I think this is how enough of these players have got together. And I'm sure there's other meetings other than this one that we're not aware of. But there you are. All right, let's talk about some other crypto stories. And these are some huge stories. Now, for example, Bitwise has got an ETF that they expect or want to get approved by the SEC. You also have Van Eck working with CBOE, which runs a futures exchange. They're trying to get a Bitcoin ETF off the ground. But Bitwise crypto indexes are now on NASDAQ, which is a big deal. Again, this is part of the mainstream, moving this stuff into the mainstream. Part of the financial system. You see New York Stock Exchange working with Microsoft and Starbucks and Boston Consulting Group trying to bring a Bitcoin physically delivered futures exchange to the market. Also, one of the things, RSX is another one, which is TD Ameritrade, looking to bring crypto trading to the masses here. They're saying that TD Ameritrade-backed RSX is about to launch its trading platform. That could happen in the next couple of weeks. That would be a big deal because right now, if you want to trade crypto, who trades crypto? You go to Coinbase, Binance, Poloniex, Kraken, these upstarts, not these main Wall Street entities. And of course, they're looking to grab a piece of that business. There's another story on RSX. As you can see, they are hooked up with TD Ameritrade. Now remember, the people at TD Ameritrade, the people at Fidelity, all these companies have access to much, 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 much larger clients. They're not just mom and pop. In fact, Binance said 93% of their trading, and Binance is the world's largest crypto exchange, and they were at this meeting at Sentosa Island, is retail. It's not yet institutional. Of course, when you bring Fidelity and Ameritrade and New York Stock Exchange and backed into the mix, that's the whole financialization. That's the institutions coming in. And then you have as part and parcel of your cultural changes. So, for example, I don't know who this guy is. There's a guy named Lil Pump. No pun intended. That's his name. He's some kind of rapper. And he's now accepting Bitcoin via Lightning Network. He supposedly have tens of millions of fans. And he's selling his merchandise via Bitcoin. Again, there's another one here. Nike they're trying to get a trademark application to sell their highly priced sneakers called Crypto Kicks. So again, you're seeing this whole thing becoming mainstream. It's happening incrementally. People that are naysayers are saying, well, not everyone's using crypto. And maybe not everybody will. Actually, I think at some point, every company, just like every company has a website, every company will have some type of goofy token that they issue. But we'll leave that to another day. And last night we talked about bricks and mortar Bitcoin, and it's the same thing. And John Moore, he's Johnny Litecoin. He goes around New Jersey and he's a payment processor guy, and he tries to get people to accept Bitcoin and Litecoin. And he talks to people who have ATMs. This is all bricks and mortar stuff. You go into a shop. This is a smoke shop he was in, and they may have a Bitcoin ATM there. People buy the Bitcoin, buy the Litecoin, and then they have a payment option, and they will then allow the people to use the Bitcoin or Litecoin that maybe they bought at their company's ATM right then and there. In this particular case, he's in New Jersey. He's saying this store is giving a 5% discount to anyone paying via Bitcoin or Litecoin. Now, why are they able to do that? Well, because now they don't have to pay the payment, the Visa fees. So it makes sense that they can just pass that along to the customer. And also, it means that if people are paying with Litecoin, maybe they buy the Litecoin at the store, so they get the fee there on the sale of the Litecoin, and then they don't have to pay the fee if they then use the Litecoin to buy their products at the place. So it's a win-win situation. Again, I said last night, if there's no friction and something makes economic sense, it will happen. It may not happen right away, but that's a much better deal for the consumer and for the merchant. And it's the same point I made, the reason why Netflix dethroned Blockbuster wasn't because at the time they didn't have their own studio. They didn't have their own shows that they were making. They didn't have live streaming. They were beating Blockbuster on the fact that for VHS tapes and DVDs, you didn't have to pay a late fee. And that became a very attractive proposition, and that's what put Blockbuster out of business. And of course, now we talk about Coinstar. Last night we also talked about the Bitcoin ATM. So now Coinstar announced today 2,000 more grocery stores will enable Bitcoin buying at their Coinstar machines. And again, you make it ubiquitous. People buy the Bitcoin at the Coinstar. They spend it at the store maybe that they bought it at. Again, I do see that happening. All right. What else do we have here? Now you've got, this is a very interesting, this BAT. It's a browser, and they did an ICO, and basically it is a browser that allows you to knock off the ads, and then you can direct the money that you would have got from the ads back to the website. Very interesting concept, and this is just another way that a particular part of an industry can be disrupted through issuing a token. Stellar doing the same thing. Stellar is available in this particular UK licensed payment platform. They're launching 26 fiat-backed stablecoins using the Stellar network. We're going to talk about Tether, too. There was a big story just broke. I'll cover it briefly. But here's another one. Lending of cryptocurrencies. Again, big money. Now, there's a company called Genesis Global Trading. Well, they lent $425 million worth of crypto, which means that Goldman Sachs did not lend $425 million worth of crypto. It means that JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Nomura did not lend that crypto. Well, that's money that they missed out on. So again, it's why they want to get into this. It's why they're trying to get the regulatory environment set up. It's also why they may buy companies like Coinbase and Binance and so on. But here's another one, Ledger, which makes a hardware wallet. The other day we were talking about how they have a deal with Nomura, the Japanese banking giant, to store cryptocurrencies. That's probably going to go live next year. But here, Samsung invests $3 million. It's not a big investment. I think Ledger has already raised over $100 million. But again, Samsung investing in crypto hardware, startup Ledger. You're seeing the large companies now. It's just like in the dot-com days where you saw, eventually now you have Walmart.com, everyone.com. But in the beginning, they had to get their feet wet working with the startup companies. And you're seeing that with Samsung. They've got a wallet already on their latest phone that comes out to put cryptocurrencies in. There's another story here. Yep. Samsung plows $2.9 million into hardware wallet. And for Samsung, that's hardly any money at all. $2.9 million. What other stories do we have here? Now, regulation. This is a big, big story, I think, in France. We saw the other day they had blockchain, Smaulgld français. They had this big blockchain week, I think it was called, in France. And the finance minister saying we want to make France the place for Bitcoin, Litecoin. No, he didn't say those. He said cryptocurrencies and blockchain. But this one is an interesting story. France makes further pitch to gain crypto business. Banks can't snub crypto startups thanks to France's new blockchain law. So what they're saying here is that a lot of companies will go to the bank with their bank account. They'll say, okay, I'm a blockchain startup company. I'm going to issue token. I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do. And I'm going to bank here. And then the bank, decides they're going to just debank this. No, we don't want your business. Well, the French law says that they can't do that as long as you are a blockchain company and you agree to be part of the regulatory environment. Again, this is big stuff here. because it means they want everything regulated. So if you're a blockchain company and you're playing by the rules and you're offering whatever crypto services, storages, you're doing an exchange, as long as you meet the regulation, the bank can't boot you. And the bank doesn't want to boot you if you meet all the regulations. And this French law makes it, I guess, illegal to debank you just because you're working in the crypto space. Let's see if we got anything else here. All right, I think that's it then for the crypto. Let's move on to 2020. So today, Joe Biden announced that he's running for president. I'm not going to comment on any of that. The only thing I did notice was now there's 20. And if they want to be egalitarian and they all want to be fair to each other, well, 20 candidates, they can only get 5% of the available votes each. There's only 5% available for each candidate to have. The only thing I'll say here is it seems very unlikely that one candidate will gain enough delegates to win on the first ballot. They're just not going to happen. The strongest candidates right now are Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden and then Pete Buttigieg. Okay? None of them are going to get over 30% of the vote unless a lot of people back out and they all coalesce around one candidate. Probably not going to happen. It's also possible that one of the other 17 may catch fire and they may move up to get 20, 30%. But here's the thing. If no one wins on the first ballot, then super delegates kick in. And you know what's going to happen there. Bernie's not going to get those super delegates and you're going to end up with one of the more established candidates. Now let's move on from the 2020. Let's talk about this Tether thing that happened today. Do I even have... Yeah, okay. A lot of people know about Tether. Tether is considered by many to be a scam. It's a stable coin and it does serve a purpose. So if you are trading on the Bitfinex trading platform and you've just sold a bunch of altcoins or Bitcoins and you don't want to convert into fiat, you just want to park your money for a while, you park it in a Tether and say, why would you do that? Well, because they tell you that if there's $600 million, $800 million, it backs each of those tethers. So it's a sense when you cash out $3,000 worth of Bitcoin, they give you $3,000 worth of Tether, and you should be happy with that because there's $3,000 worth of dollars behind them. Well, there has never been a full audit, and there's been some suspicions and issues that maybe it's not there. Now, there are other stable coins that have come out in the last year since Tether. Gemini has one, the Winklevoss twins. Coinbase has one, I think it's called True US Dollar. And these are regulated under BIT licenses. They have FDIC backed accounts, and they are audited. But Tether, which was the biggest one, I'm unsure if it still is. Maybe it is. There's always been issues. People concerned that the money isn't there. Now they're saying, according to official document released by the New York Attorney General's office, Bitfinex sent $850 million to a company based in Panama, didn't get it back, and then granted itself access to $900 million Tether cash reserves. There appears to be a lot of back and forth. They're not quite sure if they're backed, if the money is there. But the issue with all this, I don't think it reflects on the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin in and of themselves. But what it does reflect on is the problem with anything that is backed. Now, I used to think that, and a lot of people probably still think this, the issue with Bitcoin is not backed by anything. And the problem with something that's backed, however, is you have to trust that it actually is backed. And you also have to trust that whatever is being backed, or whatever the backing is, can't be stolen, can't be confiscated by a government. So we had e-gold way back in like 2005, even before Bitcoin. And the issue there is the government didn't like it, so they knew where the gold was, and they just seized it. Now, the thing about Bitcoin is there's nothing to seize. And that used to tell me, well, that's because it's not worth anything. There's nothing there. Well, I've long since abandoned that thought because there's $100 billion worth of Bitcoin, and there's no place you can go and get it. And if people actually think that it's worth $100 billion, then it's worth $100 billion. And the lack of any backing is actually a feature, not a flaw. And the Tether story is basically showing that backing a cryptocurrency with anything is a flaw. Why? Shenanigans. Doesn't look like Tether is actually backed, or Bitfinex has it, and you're not quite sure if they have it. Well, Bitcoin, you don't have to worry about that. It's not doesn't purport to be backed by anything. That's all these people talking about. Oh, wait till they back a cryptocurrency with gold and it's lights out for Bitcoin. No, it's not. If you want gold, you can buy gold. You don't need to have a crypto-backed currency. The danger with a crypto-backed currency is you don't know if they have the gold there. So that story is breaking. I think the crypto markets went down. As a result, they rebounded a bit, but they did take a hit. They were up about 1 or 2%, and then they dropped. I think Bitcoin dropped about 8 or 9%. It's only down about 5%. Now, I don't think, but this is not investment or trading advice, I don't think it's going to have a long-term impact because it's more of an impact on the concept of stable coins. And I think the world has always held Tether, just like Mt. Gox. It doesn't really have an impact. It just means that in an immature market, an unregulated market, you're going to get this kind of stuff. But actually, this is the point of the meeting at Sentosa Island, is that to get the regulation in there actually provides some stability and some confidence in these types of systems. And let's see if there's anything else here. 2020, gold, silver. Nothing gold and silver today. In the markets today, jobless claims are up today, but generally the markets were flat. Gold at 1278, silver still under 15 at 1493. Dow Jones was down about 100 points, down 5.5%, but Nasdaq was up and S&P was down. Not much movement. The dollar was up to dollar index up to 98.12, and crude oil fell a bit. I think one final story here. This is not really a story on Mueller, but this is I'm going to leave with this and then we'll get into the comments. Bob Woodward, if any of you guys know who he is, he and Bernstein, I was going to say Leonard Bernstein, but it wasn't Leonard Bernstein, it was Carl Bernstein. During the Watergate era, they were young reporters and they really tracked down their sources and they broke Watergate. They figured out what had happened and they won Pulitzer Prize. It was real journalism. And because Bob Woodward achieved this fame, he was on all the cable news channels, always talking about what was happening with Trump. And they were making the whole analogy that Trump is going down. He's going to be impeached just like Nixon. But the problem with Woodward was he wasn't doing any analysis or investigation. And one of the things that's obvious and has been obvious for 2 years in the public sphere, not because I've done any particular research, is that, for example, James Comey said in front of the world that he told Trump about this Steele dossier. He said it was salacious and unverified. But we also know that James Comey signed the FISA warrant, which used the Steele dossier as, he said, it one of the bases for the getting of the FISA warrant. He even said to one of the TV interviewers, there was other stuff, and I don't remember what it was, but that wasn't just the Steele dossier. Now, congressmen and senators have seen the FISA application unredacted, and they're all out there saying no, that was basically the basis for the granting of the FISA warrant, which was granted 4 times. Now, you would think that with that, you don't have to be a sleuth to know that. You would say, well, wait a minute. Maybe you can be biased and you can want Trump to go down. But if you are Woodward, you would think, you would say to yourself, well, let's just make sure that there was a proper predicate for investigating Trump for Russian collusion. And now that we know there was none, according to Mueller, they're starting to say, oh, this is Woodward's own words. FBI, CIA reliance on, quote, yeah, we got cut off there, but we're back. Okay, we were talking about Bob Woodward. Now, part of journalism is you can be biased and you can try to push a particular point of view, like Trump is going down, Trump colluded with Russia. There's nothing wrong with poking around and trying to find evidence that would show that. However, you do, as a journalist, have to look at, well, was the predicate there to properly investigate Trump in the first place? Now, we said that James Comey himself said that the Steele dossier was unverified and salacious, and yet we know that it was used to get 4 FISA warrants, one of them which he himself signed. He later said, well, it wasn't just the only basis for getting the FISA warrant, and he said, I just don't remember what the other things were, but we've had statements, public statements, by congressmen and senators who've seen the FISA application saying, no, the bulk of the information in there is from the Steele dossier, which Steele himself has said under oath that it was unverified. Okay, now that's a obvious thing that's in the public domain. Also, the circumstances around Papadopoulos' meeting with Mitsud and other people that he met where he said there was dirt on Hillary Clinton. Those are facts, but then the question is, were those meetings set up? Now, I don't know the answer to that, but there is a lot of information out there that indicates that maybe the people that were telling him about the dirt on Hillary Clinton from the Russians were actually FBI, CIA, or foreign intelligence friendly to the FBI and CIA, planting those stories in order to get a pretext to start an investigation. Now, you have Woodward, who you would think knows better. Instead, for 2 years, he's gone around pumping the narrative that Trump is like in Watergate, he's like Nixon, he's going down. And just the other day, he comes out and he says that the FBI reliance on the, quote, garbage Steele dossier needs to be investigated. Well, because now that the Mueller probe has showed no collusion, people are starting to think, or pretending to start to think, well, maybe how did they work for 2 years and not find anything? Well, maybe because there was nothing there to begin with. And for Woodward to say that we need to investigate this, no, you needed to investigate this last month, last year, 2 years ago. It was all out there. It's not like, and you didn't even need to be Woodward and Bernstein and have highly advanced investigatory skills. They just never bothered, didn't feel like bothering. So something I wrote here is Woodward spent 2 years talking about impeachment, but being the stellar investigative reporter, he's supposed to have never considered the legitimacy of the FISA warrants, the Steele dossier, or the origin of the Papadopoulos meeting. Now he's out there trying to say, oh, we need to look into this. No, he just cashed in on his fame on TV. All right, let's see what you guys are saying. It was a bit long tonight, but I think it's a very important story how we have this thing going on in Singapore, this meeting, Sentosa Island, I think is Bitcoin's Jekyll Island. All right, let's see what we got. I'm going to put up the fundraising page, and then we'll take your questions and comments. All right. Yeah, it sounds like I had problems with the audio here, but let's see if there's any questions or comments before I let you go. All right. I don't see any. I see a lot of comments, but nothing directed at me. All right, then. Yes, Pablo is correct. When I started talking about Woodward, I got cut off. Right then and there. I've noticed that on occasion, Pablo. That's a very good point. I start talking about it, and then the only reason I catch it is I'm looking at the screen. But I start trashing Woodward, and the next thing you know, the stream cut out. So I try to repeat myself. What I try to do to make sure that doesn't happen, I try to keep an eye on whether it's on or not, and I can catch it pretty quickly, and then shut down the stream and then try to restart it again. But thank you very much for noticing that, Pablo. And we'll see you guys tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is Friday, and we'll get back to, we didn't even go through the prices, and we'll see what happens in the gold and silver markets, the crypto markets, and give you some more news analysis. So thank you very much. Unless I see any questions or comments in the next 10 seconds, I'll give you the Bernie countdown. We'll see you tomorrow night. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the 1%, 0. Yeah, we'll see if a sensitive topic, if it is mentioning the Mueller report. Good night, everyone.